Okay, hello. Thank you very much for your patience. Following a busy weekend, we can now continue with page 53. Previously, we finished on the last line being, I was physically alive again, filled with awe, as amazed as fearful, and I had been conscious throughout the entire occurrence. So this is following on to the next section on page 53 of the projection of the astral body by Sylvan, Muldoon and Hereward, Carrington. Since the adventure I have just related to took place, I have experienced hundreds of other projections, with countless deviations from the given sensations, but with the corporeal movement always clinging to the same route as that which I have described. Although repetition naturally brings about greater perfection, this is probably one of the most unusual first projections on record, so far as consciousness is concerned, eclipsing in its clarity many of the best efforts of adept mediums. While it is my personal opinion that I naturally possess a hidden power to project the inner being from my body, I also credit the extraordinariness of the first conscious exteriorization to the fact that several remarkable mediums slept in rooms adjacent to one which I occupied. It is, in fact, as most students of the occult understand, that a line of force can be established between persons for the benefit of another person. I shall touch upon this later, inasmuch as it concerns this phenomenon. I have purposely omitted many details in drawing a picture of this first projection, which will be fully covered as we go more deeply into the study. A long story in itself could be told of the astral plane life, earthly relativity, association of phantoms, etc., yet no disclosure capable of being consigned to pen and ink could ever do justice to it at all. So I shall refrain from delving into this department now, my purpose being to give more analytic presentation of the phenomenon of astral exteriorization and how it is produced. About the first hot shot that the skeptic or even delvers into the supernormal, will give the conscious projector is that he, the projector, did not leave his physical body at all, and that what he supposed happened was but a dream, which indelibly registered in his memory. There is only one answer to this ridiculous superstition. If a person does not know when he is conscious, then indeed he should be submitted to a sanity test. The doubter will say, now, you could have been dreaming all this. In your dream you would not know you were not fully conscious. This is reverse reasoning. In a dream a man may not know that he is unconscious, but when he is conscious he does know positively he was not dreaming. Why? Simply because we have a distinct understanding of both present and past when conscious, so do not form the idea that the conscious astral projection is but a dream reminiscence. Now let us go on. From what had gone on before, we now have a fair mental picture of an astral body projection, wherein consciousness participated from the very commencement to the very finish of the process. It is, however, not always that such is the case, this being the exceptional and not the commonly met with occurrence. Consciousness, in fact, may interpose at any time or at any place or in any position during the process. It may be intersped with unconsciousness, or it may never enter into the act at all. As a rule, when consciousness does intervene, it makes its debut after the body had already separated and is walking about, totally unaware of the fact up to the time of awakening. Incidentally, this being the most common time and place for the intervention of consciousness, it is also the most desirable, for thus the preliminary and disagreeable stages spoken of in the foregoing account are eliminated from the subject's consciousness. The elementary stages, the subconsciously controlled catalepsy, zigzagging and floating, are not pleasant to experience consciously, although one soon becomes hardened to them. Nevertheless, these preliminary activities always do take place, providing, of course, that the exteriorization occurs with the physical entrance in a lying or horizontal position when the subject is unconscious. Page 55, Chapter 2, Astral Catalepsy. Mention was made of astral catalepsy, and this condition is the cause of many different phenomena attributed to other sources. It will be well to understand it more thoroughly. We have all heard of catalepsy. Webster defines it as a sudden suspension of sensation and volition with muscular rigidity. That is what is when the astral body is in the coincidence with the physical. Yet catalepsy is subconscious control of the astral body and can exist apart from the physical organism, and was shown in the above quoted experience. Under catalepsy, the astral body is set, unyielding to form, rigid, one might say, not unlike the physical body during cataleptic rigidity. When a person is physically cataleptic, he is in that condition because he is astrally cataleptic. Most of us have seen demonstrations in hypnotism, where a subject under cataleptic rigidity is suspended horizontally by his heels and head, while huge boulders are placed upon the centre of his body and smashed into bits with a sledgehammer. It is catalepsy of the astral body which produces physical catalepsy. When the phantom once exteriorized and powerless under catalepsy, the subconscious can maneuver it as it pleases. This is an example of the wisdom of the superintelligence. All of us know how difficult it is to lift a limpid, living body to the upright position, and how easy it is if the body be resistless and stiff. The subconscious, it seems, makes use of this law. Even though the astral body be cataleptically controlled, the conscious mind can function, or partially function, but usually it does not function until the spell is removed. Interesting use of word there. Sorry, that's my own input, talking out loud. Astral catalepsy reigns from the beginning of exteriorization until it progresses to the point where the phantom is in the vertical or standing position. It is not unusual for the phantom to stand there for some time before being liberated. Some projectors get only to this point and never become free, interiorizing again, all the time in a cataleptic condition. When such is the case, the body will always be unstable, swaying to and fro, from side to side, forward and backward. This really an incompleted projection. A completed projection could not be considered so unless the phantom were liberated from catalepsy. In the interiorization movement of a complete projection, catalepsy comes into being again at the time when the body is ready to transit from the vertical to the horizontal. Examples, types of projection, page 56. Types of projection. There are three kinds of projection which may be classified as conscious, partially conscious, and unconscious. Under the latter classification, unconscious, there are two distinct forms of the phenomena. First, emotive. Second, somnambulistic. Emotive unconscious astral projection is simply unconscious astral catalepsy in the perpendicular or standing position. It is a frequent happening for the projector to stand in this manner, as I have shown in the preceding paragraphs. Just as, under the unconscious classification, there are two kinds of phenomena, emotive and motive, somnambulistic. There are likewise emotive and motive types of conscious projection. The only difference between the unconscious motive and the emotive types, and the conscious motive and emotive types, is that, in the latter, the subject is awake. Obviously, the emotive type always precedes and may develop into the motive. Astral somnambulism. Just as there is somnambulism commonly called sleepwalking of the physical being, there are also persons who, while awake, walk about in the astral body. This I have termed astral somnambulism. It is a state of unconscious projection more advanced than the unconscious, emotive state. It is the state where the phantom is liberated from catalepsy, but remains unconscious, and is far more common than is generally supposed. During sleep, many mediums travel in the astral body, but never become conscious while doing so. Consequently, they never realize that fact. I stated formerly that when consciousness does intervene, it comes in most cases while the subject is either standing cataleptic or is astrally somnambulating. It has been my most common experience to gain consciousness and find myself astrally somnambulating in astral somnambulism. Just as in physical somnambulism, the subconscious mind controls the meandering body. Conscious interruptions during astral somnambulism. At scattered intervals, throughout astral somnambulism, the dormant, conscious mind may become active for infinite... The words today. Conscious mind may become active for infinitesimally short time, or partially conscious for a long or shorter time. When the intermittent flashes of awareness occur, they register muddled and haphazard scenes, sounds, etc. And the next day the subject may recall a jumble of phantasmal recollections. There are innumerable different variations of interrupted somnambulism, a perfect or imperfect working of the senses intermingled with countless degrees of consciousness, while naturally and will naturally bring about a registration upon the memory in exact accordance with the complications. It is obvious that the nearer normal is the functioning of the senses, and the nearer normal the state of consciousness, the nearer true will be the recollections. Perhaps you have visited an entirely unfamiliar place, and upon viewing it have had a faint or conglomerated recollections of having been in that spot before. Yet you knew you had not been there. It is possible that you could have been there in a state of interrupted astral somnambulism. The future contemplating subconscious mind sometimes projects the astral body to places which the subject later visits in the physical. Far more often, however, is the clairvoyant vision, and not projection, that does this. Conscious interruptions during astral projection are no means confined to the somnambulating state, for they can take place while the unconscious emotive stage too. It is easily seen that if the body be somnambulating while the flashes of consciousness are participating, it will be passing through the changing environment, which will tend to bemuddle the registration upon memory, while if the body be in the emotive condition, the registration will be more single and specific. Not all that we call dreams are caused by conscious interruptions, although some of them are, and I will point out later the relation of astral projection to dreams. Distant point projection. Page 58. Another distinct form of the phenomenon being discussed is a distant point projection. The astral body separates from its physical counterpart and travels to some faraway place during the state of unconsciousness. Although sometimes becoming conscious for an interval at that place, usually the medium, while awake, instructs his subconscious to send him to the remote place where he wishes to go, so that he may witness the scenes and events which are happening there. Trance intervenes. On awakening again, he is aware of having been at the desired place, but scarcely ever has any recollection of having made the trip. In such a case, the actual distance covered is not recalled, because the flight is seemingly made with the speed of light, and is always unconscious. Obviously, the actual distance and the creations which it contains are not consciously recorded in the projector's consciousness. There are records of distant point projectors who have been seen in the astral body, far removed from the physical, by others mediumistically inclined. No less an authority than William T. Stead has told of a lady of his personal acquaintance who was especially gifted with the ability to project afar and there materialize. She became a source of great worry and distress to her friends, for she would pay them unexpected visits, materialize and frighten them. Naturally, they supposed that she must have died, and that this was her ghost. The occurrence, however, became so frequent that her friends finally became familiar with the phenomenon and viewed it with the greatest interest and wonder. Many so-called distant point projections are probable not projections at all, as a matter of fact, but are subconscious creations of the medium's own, as the subconscious alone can vision a distant point scene, not unlike that which the conscious astral body would see, if there. Of distant point vision, one writer has said, "The view of a distant scene obtained in this way is in many ways not unlike that seen through a telescope. Human figures usually appear very small, like those upon a distant stage, but in spite of their diminutive size, they are very clear, as though they were very close by. Sometimes it is possible by this means to hear what is said, as well as what to see and what is done, but as in the majority of cases this does not happen, and we must consider it rather as the manifestation of an additional power than as a necessary corollary of faculty of sight. It will be observed that in cases of this kind, the clairvoyant does not actually leave his physical body at all. He simply manufactures for himself and uses a kind of psychic telescope. Consequently, he has the use of his physical powers, and while he is examining the distant scene, for example, his voice usually describes what he sees, even while he is in the act of making the observation." The phantom's three moving speeds. There are three different velocities at which the phantom travels. First, the natural or normal speed, which is in use when the subject is conscious and free to move about in his immediate environment, or while he is in a state of astral somnambulism. He merely walks. Second, the intermediate speed, in which the subject moves along without effort, faster than the normal speed, but not fast enough to cause loss of perception. When this takes place, one does not appear to be moving, but everything seems to be coming toward him, through him, passing him, just as the fields and fences seem to speed backward when one rides in a fast train. The phantom does not seem to pass through the door seems to pass through the phantom. Streaks of light are thrown off by the astral body and extend backwards about 2 feet as it moves along at this intermediate speed. These scintillations appear phosphorescent. These scintillations appear phosphorescent, the colour of the astral body, and trail behind it. In the same manner, these words today. Scintillations trail behind a shooting star. This immediate speed enables the subject to cover considerable distances rapidly without loss of consciousness. Third is the supernormal travelling velocity, a speed beyond comprehension. It always occurs when the subject is unconscious and is in play when the phantom is moving back and forth over great distances. It would be utterly impossible to move across a vast area at such speed to realize the distance, for the conscious mind is too slow in its thinking, and before it could formulate one single thought, the objective would have already been reached. What I have just said concerning the three speed at which the projected astral body moves is true also of permanently separated astral beings, the dead. It has been the contention of some that every transit of the projected astral body always takes place with super speed. This is true only when the phantom is moving toward a very distant place. On other occasions, the intermediate travelling speed may be used, and still at other times, the free phantom behaves in a manner befitting its physical alive self, with all its own peculiarities of stride, swing, and carriage. Sorry, I'm really sorry. Morbidity and incentive to projection. I can't read today, it would seem. But anyway, we will press on, because otherwise we'll be here reading this book for a very long time. We'll grow old together. Okay, morbidity and incentive to projection. The supposition should not be made that astral projection occurs only during natural sleep. It may take place when the subject is in practically any state of unconsciousness. In times of sickness, especially that sort of sickness which is staid or sedative, astral projection can and often does take place. It is a fact that the more weakened, languid, and enervated physical becomes, the more easily the astral member detaches itself from it. For at such times less material resistance is brought to bear against the inner workings which prompt the separation. Undoubtedly, at the time of death, many people are already erect in the astral body before the final breath of the physical body is taken, although they may not be conscious of the fact. It is my firm belief that physical debility is an incentive to most kinds of mediumship, for the less material coordination a person has, the less material will be the influences to overcome by the subconscious resources. This morbidity factor is also true of astral projection. In making this statement, I am aware that it is contrary to the ideas of many prominent authorities. Popular opinion seems to have it the perfect material coordination, which is health, is an essential requisite to the production of the phenomenon of astral projection. But I hope to discredit this belief by quoting experiences and pointing out specific reasons for believing that the contrary is true. If I do disagree with others as to what produces, assists, and influences projection of the astral body, I do so because of my own experience with this phase. So I can only say that if my disregarding contemporaries are right in their claims, then I am an exception. I shall, however, return to this morbidity question later. Exteriorization may be induced by hypnotism and mesmerism. It is a significant fact that Andrew Jackson Davis, the seer of Poughkeepsie and one of the world's greatest, had astral projection induced at an early age by a mesmerist, William Livingston. Davis's first out-of-the-body experience was that of a moving through the air in a spiral direction. Instantaneous astral exteriorization. A violent blow, especially upon the head, or of any extreme shock, wherein unconsciousness ensues as a consequence, is another common cause of instantaneous astral projection. If you wish to try a simple formula for instantaneous astral projection, allow some friend, or preferably some enemy, to strike you over the head with a baseball bat, a percussive blow. This is about the most simple method, but since you might not be conscious whilst exteriorized, it might perhaps be best to follow some of the formulae which will be given later. To speak seriously, however, it is true that a vigorous blow or jolt will often cause a speedy and speedy separation, whether the victim be aware of it or not. A conscious projection experience. A neighbour, a man of 70, whose present home is within sight of where I write this account, related an event to me which was purely a case of ephemeral or instantaneous astral projection of the conscious type. He had hitched his team one wintry day and gone into the country after a load of firewood. On his return he was sitting atop the loaded sleigh. A light snow was falling. Without warning, a hunter, who happened to be near the road, discharged his gun at a rabbit. The horse jumped, jerking the sleigh and throwing the driver to the ground head first. He said when he told me of the incident that no sooner had he landed upon the ground than he was conscious of standing up and seeing another himself lying motionless near the road, face down in the snow. He saw the snow falling all about, saw the steam rising from the horses, saw the hunter running toward him. All this was very exact, but his great bemuddlement was that there were two of him, for he believed at the time that he was observing all that occurred from another physical body. As the hunter came near, things seemed to grow dim. The next conscious impression he had was of finding himself upon the ground, with the hunter trying to revive him. What he had seen from his astral body was so real that he could not believe that there were not two physical bodies, and he even went so far as to look for tracks in the snow in the place where he knew he had been standing. Okay, bear with me, 5 more minutes. Instantaneous projection is not uncommon. Page 62. Such a manifestation at this not only shows how unchanged the individual is when apart from his physical body, in everything but substance and composition, but it also demonstrates that the astral body is a component part, the very self, of earthly existence, that is the seat of the conscious mind, and is not created by will of the individual. Many people have undergone more or less similar experiences, but, being ignorant of just what took place, have discarded it as some unexplainable or peculiar capable of the physical self. The duration of such an instantaneous projection depends upon the severity of the concussion causing it. If the blow or shock be violent, a longer interval of unconscious results than if it is less vigorous. It may easily be seen that the more prolonged the unconsciousness, the longer lived could be the exteriorization. The ephemeral coma could only allow ephemeral projection, and many times the duration of the exteriorization is but a fraction of a second. In truth, exteriorization and interiorization of the astral body can take place with such speed that the subject does not realize that he was out of his physical body at all. Having only felt dazed for an instant, and perhaps during that instant he believed that he had advanced about a foot beyond the spot where he was actually standing. Probably everyone has at some time in his life encountered a jolt that made him see stars, as the saying goes. The glow seen as an aura and is visible for an instant, and the two bodies discoincide. This same glow, a greater expanse, can be seen for a longer time when the projection is conscious, i.e. the beginning of a prolonged separation. The astral phantom is so very much our very self that we do not realize how bound up in it we are. We do not seem to comprehend that we are using it in this very moment. It is our life, this astral body, and when it permanently severs from the physical body, that physical is of no account. I wish I could convince you, reader, that this phantomous body is not a new entity which you will acquire in the future. It is the you of the present, your consciousness, your animation. This is really interesting thing, as this was somebody's view. I mean, this copy is 1954, but the original views of this man and this collaboration between the two was first published in 1929. So this book would actually have been created, and it would have taken a long time to actually get it to the point where it was first published. So the ideas and theories and so forth that they put forward is something that blows my mind. It really does. But anyway, sorry, I apologize. Without the astral body, your physical anatomy would be but a crude mass of insensible material, lying inert in the power of gravity. This phantom becomes accustomed to the habits it has formed by being coincident with, or merged into, the physical and made to conform to the laws applying to the physical. When something unusual or unnatural occurs to upset the harmony of the physical, a shock, a jolt, a broken habit, an intense unappeased desire, sickness, in fact anything which would cause a lack of perfect material coordination, there is always a jar to the astral. Okay, I'm going to leave it there, and we will be following with the next chapter. Collision may cause astral exteriorization, which is on page 63. Hopefully I can scratch it out till 30 minutes again. Just before I go, a firm apology in regards to some of my pronunciation. Please understand that when you're reading to record straight away and you're 25 minutes in, and sometimes the words get a little jumbled or a little complicated. It is very old world printing. It has been reprinted probably with a watered down sort of language, and if it does bother you, I do apologize in advance. Okay, so hopefully I will speak to you in another time, and we'll go for the next chapter. Thank you.